Howdy, folks. Happy Wednesday. Happy hump day. We have some things to discuss, some interesting games in the NHL last night, but we'll start with the pre-show. Go ahead, Russ.
Yeah, so one of my childhood heroes died of Willis Reed. A lot of people know him. He's known for the 1970 finals where he came out injured he had bad knees. He had his knee wrapped, and he came out and he had to go up against Will Chamberlain. I think he only played like 8 minutes, scored like 4 or 6 points, but he wasn't supposed to play.
He scored the first 2 baskets.
Right, that's right. And he wasn't supposed to play, but he did, right? And so like it is still carried on into even the 21st century because like when Stamkos played in the Stanley Cup, they said he was kind of doing a Willis Reed. And so it's nice. But the thing is that what I want to really highlight is he did a lot on and off the court, but this guy was a 6'10" guy in an era where the big guys were starting to come in. He had to play against Russell. He had to play against Chamberlain. He had to play against Jabbar. So it's like at 6'10", he was at a disadvantage, but he figured out how to, muscle himself into the paint and how to push guys back when he was playing defense. Because back then you could actually touch a player. I know it's a different game now. So he mastered that. He figured out how to do a little bit of a hook shot at times, not like Jabbar, but just enough that, he wouldn't get blocked. But his thing was big rebounds, playing under the boards like a center used to. And so, I was sad because that's what got me into basketball. I saw both Knicks championships. I liked the 73 team better because I was a big Earl Monroe fan. I used to do the spin move in my backyard on the hoop. But sadly with the Knicks, and the reason I had to give them up for my mental health is they haven't won since I was 10 years old. Right. And I couldn't have another team like the Jets in my life. So I chose the Jets over the Knicks. So, but I still said that Willis Reed well.
Kev, somebody made an interesting point because I was listening to New York radio yesterday, and they were talking a lot about Willis Reed, and they had Marv Albert on the broadcast, and somebody made the point, and I think it's pretty apt, is that and I think it was a broken leg, Russ. I think he had a broken leg. It was and he played on it. They shot him up, and he played on it.
I thought Reed was a knee, but either way.
Yeah, but
I don't think it was a broken leg.
No, okay. I think it was a bad knee. In those days, with a bad knee, they couldn't do much for you.
But the point I'm making is that nowadays the medical staff of these teams would not allow a player to play on a leg like Willis Reed did, or like Bob Bond did in 1964 on a broken leg, or Stamkos, or whatever, that they wouldn't allow it because, these players are worth so much and their future is worth so much. I mean, maybe that is gone by the wayside in professional sports, that players are allowed to play like that.
Well, I'm a little less sure about that than you are. I do think they do try to be a lot more careful than they were back then. But, players oftentimes sort of push the envelope themselves. And
yeah, who was the wide receiver for the Patriots that was clearly concussed that went right back into the game?
Yeah, and we've had issues with players fighting the concussion issue all the time in the NHL. But what I want to say about Willis Reed, just to amplify what Russ said, what he did has become the standard for inspirational performances. And beyond even Stamkos, every time somebody does that, they make reference to. I remember watching that game. It was an afternoon game on a Sunday afternoon, and he came out and, as Russ said, played very few minutes, but it was all the Knicks needed. He came out and hobbled, literally hobbled up and down the court. And that just sort of became kind of a symbol that now we use that as a standard. And, that was a long time ago,
1970.
Yeah, for sure. So, 52 years ago, and yet we're still sort of talking about, that. So, that's a guy who's left his mark just for that alone. And he was much more than that, as Russ said. So,
yeah, and Russ, Spike Lee was on Michael Kay's show yesterday, and he was, regaling about, because apparently he was at that game in 1970. He was like 13 years old, and he was at the game.
Also, Spike Lee's older than me. That's good to know.
Yeah. Yes. Nobody's older than you, Russ. You're the oldest person in the world.
I know one other person on this panel. No, anyhow.
No, Kevin's younger than you. But at least in attitude he is. But he was talking about how and we can relate this to music, and we can relate this to our sports heroes. It's like, we're like I'm 55, and all of our heroes are dying. Like it's like I mean, Bill Russell died. Now obviously Willis Reed died. Spike Lee was telling the audience that Willie Mays is not doing well right now, and there's one of the greatest baseball players of all time. It's just the reality of life. But all the people that we idolized as kids, whether it be sports or music, are going, and it's really depressing. It's really sad.
Well, it is, and I think one of the issues is that the romance of the game that was alive and well in the 67 and into the 80s has given way to big business sports. And I also think there's so much information available about each player that we've sort of lost the mystique of the sport. Like we know way too much about every athlete. And, when I was a kid, it was a mystery. I've often talked about this, that, when you played the Tigers in 1968, played the Cardinals, we knew nothing about the Cardinals. Like it was just as if they played on Mars.
The only thing that was good, Kev, like you got box scores, but if you were at the ball game and you scored the game, then they would have things, little tidbits about the other league, and you would get
and you could see the starting pitchers. They had the little numeric rosters of
so I would learn from that. Yeah.
Well, you would, and the sporting news. I mean, that was the Bible. I mean, you could get in and fielding averages, and I'm amused now about all the analysis we get. And the fancy stats, and the coach in Detroit always talks about the quote underlying numbers, which I really like. I think that's the best way, because it adds a layer of mystique to them. What are the underlying numbers? So
Joe, I'll give you an example of how I would deem myself a prehistoric analytics nerd. Because when I was 12 years old, and this would be 1979, and I was playing Stratomatic hockey, I sent a letter to the NHL offices in New York asking for the statistics at the end of the year, because I missed the hockey news at the last at the end of the year that had all the regular season stats. So about 4 weeks later, I get a letter, I get an envelope that's this thick, and it has the breakdown of every one of the teams, including shooting percentage, shots on goal. I mean, it was like Christmas. I got that. So it's like, but now that's.
You know who probably sent that to you, Mike?
Oh,
Kevin and my buddy Steve.
Yeah, Steve Cherndorf was.
That was his job.
Well, what year was that?
79.
No, just a little early. Not much. Though.
That's what he did. I mean, he's the guy who invented. It was his job to put those stat packages together for people who wanted them. And he also was the one who kind of invented like the media guide concept that we see, at games. I've seen some of his old ones. It's hilarious. I mean, he showed me some of his old.
I wish I kept it. I wish I had it.
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely what he did for people because there were other people like you, other crazies out there that wanted to know the stats, and he was the one who came up with it.
Yeah, when we would run the stats, even at USA Today in the 80s and into the 90s, we didn't run them. We just had not enough space because we used to run them weekly. The phones would ring off the hook. People would just go nuts on that because they used it for their fantasy hockey, and that was kind of the weekly thing. And some weeks we just didn't have the space for it. So
just to answer Chris from Long Island, I think I did wait at the Stratomatic office once for them to open to get the New Year's set. But most of the time, because I lived on the island, you would get it in 2 days.
Yeah.
You would get it in the mail in 2 days.
Glenhead, New York. Believe me, many a dollar of mine has gone.
Oh yeah, same here.
New York.
I did have to bring up just because, and I started to say this, and then my internet went out. But and I wasn't the only one. I kind of walked into the Ohtani Trout confrontation like that. That was a wow factor on that. That was unbelievable, and it was amazing. People are going to talk about that. Even if you didn't pay any attention to the WBC, That was incredible because it's two.
I did see that. That was worthy.
Yeah. I mean, two teammates. Like, imagine the discussion, what that's going to be like, because obviously they didn't say anything after it happened. So there is going to be a discussion about that. And the confrontation was so fascinating that one thing that was overlooked is how much Ohtani's pitch broke.
Yeah.
Like that was like unbelievable how it moved. And talking about delivering in a big moment like that was just such a phenomenal thing. And of course, that's what sports is about. So.
Of course, I'm gonna be the wet blanket on this, Joe, because I said that marks the only time that two Angels players will play for anything of consequence.
Yeah, I did love that. Trout said it's the most fun he's had in 10 years, which I'm like, oh, yeah, you're not wrong, buddy. You're not wrong, but it's a great moment. It's so cool.
It was so cool, and I'm sure Mike saw this, and of course I'm sure he agreed with it. But Mike Trout is already committed to the next one, saying, this was just so great, and in order to get all the North Americans on board, but in particular the Americans, obviously you need to have players like Trout just say, "Come on aboard," and do it. And we have the same problem in hockey. You can't get players to play in the World Championship.
I would love if they would just not do it in spring training.
Me too.
I want them to do it like World Championships does it with hockey. Like do it at
the season's over,
regular season, and go for it. Because every other international league season, Japan will be over. Mexico might still be going on. All that stuff, but like it's almost exclusively Major League Baseball guys. So just do it after the season's over. It's easy.
Yeah,
for sure. All right. Try to keep my dog from attacking a fox. There's foxes outside right now, and my dog's going nuts. I barred her in so she can't get to the foxes, but the foxes are just sitting on the other side of the fence, just looking at her. Hilarious. Standing there, they're just looking at her. She doesn't have anything to do with a fox. I mean, she's going to get destroyed by a fox. Nope. So leave her alone. All right, here we go. Ready? I'm here. All right. The Hockey World is Wednesday, March 22nd. So it'd be 32223. 32223 is the date. 32223. Hey, yeah, there we go. That's a palindrome date. Go ahead, Mike.
I'm Michael Agello, and I was just waiting for Eck to shut up.
There you go.
I'm Joe Yurton. I'm with Bleacher Report and Noted Hockey. Hello.
Wes Cohen from Sportsology. Name me the starting pitcher from last night's game for Team USA.
I'm Kevin Allen, and I can't do it.
Nothing says a championship game like Merrill Kelly.
Adam Eklund, you're watching HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast where everyone just sits and waits for Eck to shut up. We come to you every Monday through Friday to fill you in on the comings and goings in the hockey world. And I want to last night I've been tallying my Buzztron 10,000. Well, I downgraded to the Buzztron 9,500 today because it for the first time all season it had a losing night more than just a one. Like the other two losses where it went 2-3 twice. But last night it goes 4-8. And last night that was the out of 18 nights it's only led 3 losing nights, which is still pretty good. But 4-8 last night was very consequential, and the way it went 4-8 was even more interesting because Mike, the Islanders, it's not over. It's not over for the Islanders. Sorry.
No, it's not.
Really talk about the Islanders thing.
I'll say this. If the Islanders played Toronto 82 times, then it wouldn't be over. But because honestly, it's like, and this is my concern, and I'll just briefly.
I'll raise my hand. I'm concerned about the Leafs. I'll briefly turn it into a Toronto take, but then go to an Islanders take.
Mm-hmm.
Toronto over the last week and a half have shown 3 times, once against Buffalo, a team that knows how to do nothing but lose lately.
Right.
One to Ottawa, who is a really good young offensive team, but defensively are not very good still. And last night against the Islanders. Long gaps of just going absolutely comatose. But the Buffalo and Ottawa games in the third period with the game on the line. Here in the first period, after Sorokin makes an absolutely incredible paddle save on Eric Gustafsson,
the
Leafs essentially crumbled against a team who not only was without Matt Barzal, who's their best offensive player, Brock Nelson gets knocked out probably with a concussion in the first period, and they get beat by Cal Clutterbuck and Hudson Fasching.
This is how the Islanders do it, Mike. Last night was the classic.
No, it was more of a Leaf loss than it was an Islander victory.
The Islanders make it always look like it's more of a your loss than an Islanders victory, though. They do. They're good at that. When the Islanders are playing their best, they get ahead of you. And when they get ahead of you, you're screwed because if you try to open up things against the Islanders, that's when they're at their best. They will frustrate the living daylight out of you and make you look terrible every time. And they haven't been able to get ahead enough this year to be able to play this game. But watching it last night, I'm like, there it is. There's
well, that's how bad the performance was last night. It was Kevin. The Islanders scored 7 goals. The only time they'd scored 7 this year was against Anaheim, who's arguably the worst defensive team.
Yeah, they actually
was not one of the worst defensive teams, but they played like it last night.
No. Actually, when I looked up after the game, I was surprised that Toronto was only 9th in scoring in the NHL this season. But anyway, I got to bring this up. John, who I don't think is John, the real estate novelist from the Billy Joel song, but John is my guy who writes about our about Mike and going after Mike, and he got on me for letting you off the hook. Said that you said it says, yeah, I know you're Mr. Profit, and as he pointed out, he said, Kevin, you are far from Mr. Profit because you make it a point to say that you're never sure what's going to happen in sports, and that's your whole side. And he said, what you said at the time was when Mike said, well, they're out because they can't score, and you said, yeah, I don't know, I think they're goaltending, like I think they got a shot, and that is true. So I did not predict that, and nor do I regularly say that like they're either in or they're out. But I thought they had a chance because I really liked their goaltending. And you said on the other, as he pointed out, and he actually said to me, you give Russ a hard time about declarative statements. He said, but Mike is far worse.
Thank you.
Far worse.
Thank you, John.
There you
He
go.
said, Mike always acts as if he's always got it figured out, especially with the Maple Leafs.
Yes, for sure.
That's because I do.
Yeah.
But Joe, let me say this. The Islanders have a 1-up on Pittsburgh and on Florida in the battle for the wild card because they have Sorokin. And Sorokin, that save that he made on Gustafsson yesterday turned the game around. It was 1-0 Toronto, would have been 2-0. The Islanders score early in the second, get 3 goals in the second, and then when the Leafs climb to within a goal, they respond quickly and they win running away. Sorokin was the reason. The Leafs got frustrated, and he's going to play the majority of the games down the stretch. But offense is going to be a factor with them, and if Nelson is out for a lengthy period without Barzal and without Nelson, I still think they're in trouble.
Yeah, it's fun, and I'm going to cite Don Granato, which I know I get. It's probably not the the best guy to be pointing out for wisdom, but he said defense is great, goaltending's nice, but the goals are what's going to win you the games. Right. And the Islanders struggle at that in a big way. And I mean, yes, Sorokin can be the difference if it's if you're talking a 1-goal game. Yeah, of course he's going to be the difference. He's great, but at the same point, if you can't put any goals past the other goalie, you're looking to have a rock fight every game, and I think the Islanders would be pretty happy with that, honestly. But I don't know. It's so tough for me to look at what the Isles do offensively and think like, yeah, no, they've got it. I mean, Sorokin's been great, but man, oh man, I look at what Bobrovsky's been doing since like February. He's like a 9-15 goalie. Florida's already scored a ton of goals. Like 9-15 is plenty good enough to win you games. Sorokin's 9-26 in the same time, but the Isles don't score. So
the only thing I'll say is, and I'll still say Florida will make the playoffs, but something that we all had worried about, and when you see it live, Florida's defense is really loose, man. It's really loose.
It is.
They score a ton. They score a ton.
They're really They really are. Like they're a offensive team through and through. With that depends on a super game from Bobrovsky or or outscoring the opponent. So here's the current updated standings, guys, and so it's interesting. Should come up right now. There you go. So this is as of today. So what's interesting here is, so Florida and the Islanders right now, the wild card and bubble, you can see they have identical records based on this, the identical projected records right now. The ROW for the Islanders currently they have one more ROW. That's the tiebreaker, right? But but if if this thing plays out like it predicts to play out, the Florida Panthers would actually end up with one more ROW. So it ends up. So that's why this is so tight right now between these two teams.
Let me bring this up because this was a talking point in our group chat last night because Russ was at the Flyers Florida game and the Panthers were playing second of back-to-back games, and they were playing Alex Lyon, former Flyers minor league goaltender.
Yes.
And of course, Lyon did not play well, and the Flyers won the game. But during the game, Russ was destroying the Panthers because they played Lyon, and I'm like,
not for the whole game. I destroyed them when it was 4-2. There was like 2 minutes to go in the second period. I was like, take out Lyon, put in Bob. And I was like, because you can't just let this game fritter away. I don't care how many games Bob has played in a row. He's had 2 periods off here. Good enough. And they didn't do it. And the Flyers literally scored their 5th goal 30 seconds later. And I was like, if they could have gotten out of that period 4-2 with the offense they have, they could have managed to maybe get a point out of that game. And they didn't. They just let Lyon stay in, and Lyon just gave up that next goal. Like, it was such an awful goal from a goalie perspective. I don't know if you saw it, Ek.
I saw it.
So Lyon, for some reason, with Provorov coming in on him, was protecting the far post. He was leaning that way. That would be an impossible shot. And then when Provorov just made a little move to go the other way, Lyon tried to shift, and he falls down. He flops because he can't do it because he was spending so much time holding the other post. And it's like, what are you doing? That's the far post. He can't make that shot.
Yeah, but Kevin, bringing in Bobrovsky.
Let Ek comment because it's a goalie.
Yeah, it was absolutely true. But, I don't know what I think he was out thinking himself. Like, he's a very smart kid, but he also does tend to like overthink himself. I think he was over fired up for the game too. Like, I felt like that, when I watched it, because obviously he wanted to do well. He's a good goalie. He's not a terrible. I do think he's got backup goalie potential in the NHL. I've always have thought that. Last night wasn't the night to see that, obviously, but I like him a lot. I know kind of interesting about him playing for the Panthers is he is represented by, or was actually signed by Bill Zito as an agent. Like one of the last players he signed as an agent before he became the GM, and he's still represented by Acme Sports Management, which is Zito's former company. Of course, he has no connection with that at all anymore. He had to completely, disavow everything from that. But
is Wiley Coyote with that company too? Yeah,
Acme. Yeah, they are. They are. So is Pinky and the Brain. Yep, all those guys are definitely for sure. That was, to me, that was interesting because, when I saw him play last night, I thought it was a good idea. Like, to go, if you're going to go with him in that situation against the next team, go.
Well, you left him in when it was 4-2. That's my question.
And 4 goals in the second period, you gotta. Yeah, I mean that's like that's not good.
Well, the whole point of playing Lyon was to give Bobrovsky, who had played, I think, 11 or 12 games.
Doesn't matter. He had almost 2 periods off. I don't care. I have to make the playoffs. I'll worry about Bob later. He's a big boy. I got to make the playoffs.
Well, Kev, their concern is everything in terms of their playoff hopes right now rest on Bobrovsky because Spencer Knight is not going to be back for the rest of the year. They had to find a way to give him a night off. Lyon had not played in the NHL in 2 months. They sent him down to the AHL to get a game or two to get sharp for the game, and apparently he wasn't sharp. But they had to play him, and why take him out?
Yeah, I mean, I'll check when I'm done talking here, but I think when I looked this morning, the Panthers are still considered the favorite to win the first wild card, just in terms of their strength of schedule, home and away, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, see what your thing says. My thing has them as to win the second wild card right now, but barely. But absolutely barely, and it's a dead heat between them and the Islanders. And my thing, I still have the Penguins in the first wild card, even though I know they've struggled.
Yeah, the Penguins actually have fallen in terms of percentage, just on the fact that they're struggling so mightily. But one thing I don't think we're giving the Islanders enough credit. I just did the math and looked it up. For the last 15 games, the Islanders have averaged 3.4 goals per game, which coincidentally is exactly what they Toronto Maple Leafs are averaging for the entire season is at 3.4 per game. And Barzal's coming back. And I saw somewhere, hopefully there's some Islanders fans that think that the scoring rate for the Islanders is either gone up or has been consistent since Barzal became injured, and he is coming back. So they have.
That is true. I saw that too, Kev. But then I know people are going to say keep Barzal out because I was already seeing those ridiculous tweets.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that is the fact that Horvat, has gotten, has sort of replaced Barzal. Correct. And he was sort of trying to assimilate when he went down. So and the other thing, the other thing, there's only one other team that's down there in terms of scoring numbers that we consider, and we like this team. I think we all do, and that's the Minnesota Wild.
Yeah.
And yet we never talk about, at least not very often, about how difficult it is for them to score goals. We just, as a general rule, and I like the Islanders goaltending better than Minnesota's. Now that doesn't mean I don't like Minnesota's. It just means I just think
would agree. They have better goaltending. It's slightly better.
Yeah. So
and the Wild did win last night against New Jersey, which is one of my John's predictions. That was one of them that got right. But there were some crazy games last night, obviously, and I think that at the end of the day, the Islanders put themselves in a much better spot last night. They really did. That was a huge win. And now,
that was a big win. There's no way around it. And
Florida
will be against them, but it is a big win.
Florida losing to Philly is a very big thing too, because that really is not what we want. That really was a game that that they have penciled into the win column. So
but they're all big now, don't you think? At this point,
they're all big. I was in the Florida room. They weren't fazed by it. Like, they're just like, Reinhart was basically just like, next game, we'll be fine. We were just a little slow tonight. And maybe they were. They were playing back-to-back. Maybe that was the issue for a little while in that game. End of the day, they knew that – I'm sure the players knew with Lyon in there having not played, it was not their best chance to win. I'm sure they knew that. So – end of the day, they kind of gave one back and said, all right, now we got to, do that much better. And now Bob probably plays the rest of the stretch. Like, I don't think Bob gets a day off now.
No. I don't think he'll be able to. I mean, Bob doesn't mind playing every day. Like, he is.
No, he doesn't. That was the point.
And I remember in Philly, like when he didn't play in Philly, he was on. Even when he did play, he's always on the bike right after the game. He was a crazy workout fanatic. Like, he is.
Back to back is an issue.
The issue is injuries, right? With back-to-back, not necessarily the fact.
I'm going to tell you this though. I covered when Mike Sullivan was coach of the Boston Bruins. It's a long time ago. Mm-hmm. I interviewed Andrew Raycroft, and he had played like 16 games in a row, and he was just like, "It's fine, no big deal."
Those days are over with, Russ.
But when you need to
be, they don't have to be, Mike. I mean, they really
don't have to be.
Yeah. Okay. So. Okay, Sergei Bobrovsky gets hurt last night playing second of back-to-back. Paul Maurice gets destroyed.
When has he ever gotten hurt doing a back-to-back that you could point out?
Well, that's because he doesn't do it.
No, he has done it. What do you mean?
In recent years.
There's only 10 games left here. It's like you're looking at the point, where you got to try. Making the playoffs for Florida is millions of dollars. I can't stress enough. Like, making playoffs for Florida is millions of dollars.
I'm looking at Florida's schedule right now, and next week they have the last back-to-back of the regular season where they play at Toronto and at Montreal. They will play Alex Lyon against Montreal.
They may not. I wouldn't guarantee that.
I wouldn't guarantee it either. But I do think that coaches now believe that you're better off. And this goes back to, if you remember the great season that Tuukka Rask had when they made a concentrated effort to limit his games and how strong he looked in the postseason. And after that, teams have started. And now, they talk about, Ville Husso in Detroit had never played more than 42 games in his professional career. And they're trying to keep him at like 58 or 59. And so, they're working in the backup and all that kind of stuff. And they're not even in the playoff hunt. So if they're doing that, the teams that are in a playoff hunt are going to try. But, I do agree with what Russ saying. If it comes down to they got a chance to get in, they're going to play them back to back. Like if it's that close, like they probably will do it. I don't think you'll do it very often, but I think depending on the situation, you're going to have to do it. Just like you end up playing guys crazy amounts of minutes. As well. So you don't want to do it on a regular basis, but
I mean, it is nice when you look at their schedule, Mike, that they only have one back-to-back, like you said. I mean,
right.
they go to, they're in Toronto. So, I mean, they're at the Rangers their next game, where they have actually dominated like that over the last few years. Florida has taken apart the Rangers. This is a different kind of Rangers team. That's going to be a great game, right? Then they're at Ottawa. They've beaten 95% of the time over the last 3 years. That doesn't mean anything either necessarily, but I'm just saying that they have, then the Toronto, Montreal back-to-back. So they have 4 games in the next, starting tomorrow, 4 games in the next 6 in those 6 nights. That's where you're going to have. Will they play Bob in Montreal game? It might depend on how they do in the other 3.
I mean, Joe, at this point in the season with 12 games to go, I mean, every point counts. Every point is valuable. And I get what Russ is saying. It's like, they're in a tight, Florida's in a tight race for one of the 2 wild cards, but with as many games as they played Bobrovsky in a row because Spencer Knight is not available, they had to find a night off for him. And, if you had to say, now you would hope that your team could suck it up against Philadelphia, one of the worst teams in the league. They weren't able to do it. Now, and that's on the rest of the team. I don't know if that's on Alex Lyon.
Well, there was a lot last night. I'm sorry, Joe finish. I'm sorry.
No, yeah. I mean, you gotta get him a break, but I mean, you also have to get in the playoffs. Is the thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can't just say, well, you need to get him some time because we got playoffs to think about. It's like, no, you have playoffs to get into. So I mean, you got to get him in there. This is where you feel bad about Spencer Knight having the troubles he's had, and he's not able to spell them because I mean, I'm with you, Eck. I like Alex Lyon too, but I don't need him in the spot. I need Bobrovsky to be the guy. And you know what? Sure. He's played 40. I'm looking at his numbers. He's played 47 games. They got 11 games to go. He can handle the load. I know it's back to backs, but geez, if you get in the playoffs, it doesn't matter anymore. There's one back to back. Pain once you're in the playoffs.
Yeah, you are. Well, then this is the thing. I mean, it's not like, you might as well get your money's worth for this guy. I mean, for crying out loud. We all sit there and talk about what you're paying Bobrovsky, right?
Yeah. $10 million a year should get you some back-to-back nights.
He's not going to tell you he can't do it either.
Back. And if the Florida Panthers, they are one of those teams that I've said this before, that they making the playoffs, and I've talked to Bill Zito about this, making the playoffs to the Florida Panthers is very important. I mean, the money that they get for every gate that they get in the playoffs is enormously important for that franchise. That's money. That's getting Bob's money back, basically. Their weight that Bob's going to pay them back by getting them into the playoffs, essentially.
Mm-hmm. And they'll give them practices off, and that kind of stuff. They'll try to do what they can.
He's a competitor, Kevin, and he's the kind of guy that if I'm the coach, I take him in the room and I'm say, "There's the challenge, Bob. You're going to get us in the playoffs. It's up to you. Take us in." And he's the kind of guy that'll thrive on that. Like he'll be like, "Okay, I got this. I can." He'll be, and because I've talked to him, he's so intense. He's just a great, intense guy. I have a question for Joe and Kevin, because my issue here is this. So my Buzztron, right, is trying the one thing it doesn't take into account that is very difficult to take into account is when teams give up, when teams just stop. And it doesn't always happen in the NHL because sometimes teams that are out of it manage to start winning again because they're not playing for anything. But how much have the Sabres given up?
To me, they have not given up. The results and the games look like they have.
Right.
But this is, and I'm, Granato and the players have preached this after, all these bad losses that they've had. And I'm buying it. So maybe either I'm a believer or I'm a sucker on this, but they've put this on. This is a young team getting their first taste of a playoff race and the pressure of a 12 years out of the playoffs drought, that it's all kind of falling on their shoulders, and they're you try to put that stuff out of mind, but the second you give up a goal, it's like, there we go. Things snowball from there, and we've seen it happen the last one. I look back to the Washington game; they're up 4-2 with 10 minutes to go,
right?
And what was it? Oshie, I think Oshie scored, made it 4-3. Then it's like, and then everybody got tight. Everybody's squeezing the sticks in the sawdust, the whole thing. And it's happened every game. The Philly game, they look terrible, but same thing. Give up the first goal. It's like, oh, geez, there we go.
Yeah.
And then Boston, listen, Boston's great, but putting 7 on them twice, 2 games in a row against Buffalo, it doesn't happen. And then last night, it's the same thing. You get down into a 4-0 hole, and Nashville's playing they got a half a roster that's been in Milwaukee this season.
Yeah.
Joe, you should be giving up 7.
They're going hard. And I wanted to ask Kevin after Detroit giving up.
About giving up, I feel about giving up the same way I do about tanking. Really, like it's not something players do, but what I think happens is they become so demoralized by what's going on that it just overwhelms them. Like the Red Wings look like they've surrendered, and after their last loss, Andrew Kopp, who's very articulate, came out and said, "Now that's a misread." Like he said, I can tell you, I've been in the league, whatever it is, 7 years, and he said we're competing really hard. Like he said, I'm kind of proud of that we're competing. We just have to find a way to play more inspirational hockey. And lo and behold, the next game they won a 3-2 shootout, which was only their 3rd win. And I was kind of wondering whether he said something in the room, because he seemed very sincere. Like he said, our compete level is high. But you could just tell they're demoralized. Nothing's going right. They were in the playoffs for 24 hours. Like I think that's
that's right.
Like they were in the playoffs for 24 hours. It was a game against the Rangers, and then since then they've slid and played just terrible hockey. And so I do think don't think they. It's not a conscious thing. I just think it just snowballs.
Surrender's a better word.
Joe, I think it's a tough case for me to make, and I've been saying this for a while, that the Sabres should have done something at the deadline to get a goaltender, when in the last 4 home games they've given up the most goals in the history of the NHL in 4 games in a 4-game block at home. But that being said, I talked to Russ about this, and he sort of he agreed with the point. You go back a few weeks and 1 save gets made in 1 game and they get more confidence out of that 1 game. You don't know what the road would be. And I know the reaction of a lot of Sabre fans, and they're pissed off that this organization at least didn't try, not go out and get Demko or Gibson or somebody that's a long-term commitment. And Kevin and I talked about this, before the issue with the Pride Night, a Reimer or somebody like that who was available for a draft pick. That's an upgrade over Comrie or Anderson or Luukkonen.
Well, I look at it this way, and I drew this comparison in my post-game write-up last night. And I think I may have even said this last week on stream. The Sabres are in a similar spot to where Austin Matthews' rookie year Leafs were. Granted, that team made the playoffs. They were a 95-point team. But they're also in the same spot the Devils were last year. Super young team, key injuries at key moments in the season, bad goaltending all around. I mean, Jonathan Bernier was their best goalie last season. He played 10 games and had a 902. Everybody else was below 900. Right. But it's so many young guys, and there's so many guys, and they took beatings for 2 years. Heischer and Hughes both. This team's going to grow from it, and they're getting the same kind of bad goaltending. And listen, I know you could say go out and get a goalie, fix this, but you're putting tape over a leaky hole. I look at it, I look at some of these these big blowout games, and I'm just seeing the defense just standing around. The second goal last night from Nashville, there was a view from the crowd that I found on Twitter, somebody shooting video, and you can just see everybody in blue chasing the puck, following the puck. Duchesne makes a pass from the half wall, gets over to Tomasino on the other side. Nobody picks up Duchesne on the other side. Whoop, 1 pass, and he's right there to bury it.
So let me ask you this question.
Things like that where, there's defensive letdown. They were doing alley-oop passes for like the next 15 minutes over top of the defense, and guys were leaking in through, getting breakaways, 2-on-1s. It was nuts. So
let me ask you this.
It's so many issues compounding each other.
Okay, but goalie aside, I was shocked that they got Jordan Greenway where they should have gotten a defenseman. If they got a defenseman with term, hey, you got that guy for next year too. They still need defense. They do.
They do, and they they addressed it to a degree with Riley Stillman. Tough guy. He's played. Okay. I know. He's played okay. He's been playing on a pair with Labushkin, who's been very good of late. The last couple months, he's been very solid for what they need him to do. He's not going out scoring 10 points a week. He's just not going to do that. But he provides the physical presence. He plays a hard up defense, and so that's kind of what Stillman does too. Stillman's also kind of the bouncer for that group, and he felt bad that he wasn't able to get at Trent Frederick sooner in that game on Sunday, and he wasn't able to fight him. I mean, Dylan Cousins ends up doing that, and he took a pretty stiff right from him. But I mean, it's with Greenway. I mean, I feel like Greenway came over. He was banged up already. They had him sit out last night because whatever injury he's got, Granato said it's something that prevents him from playing the way we need him to play.
There you go.
So it's little things like that where it's just kind of like it's bad luck. It's bad luck at the bad times of the season, and things the moves they made, they weren't going to make a blockbuster move at this deadline. It just wasn't going to happen. This summer, different story. Next year, different story, because next year it's playoffs or bust next year.
Right.
Well, Kevin, you wrote for Hockey Now about Gibson and the same.
Yeah, I want to talk about that. Yeah, because I said to you like who you're going to get.
Right.
And lo and behold, this morning I got my answer, and it came from an unlikely source. Dan Rosen is a veteran hockey writer, but he writes for NHL.com, and they don't normally get into trade speculation. That's not their thing. But he wrote, I thought, a very insightful piece about the situation with Gibson. And I know Mike has been on that bandwagon before. I think it was more wishful thinking, because Pat Verbeek was pretty adamant that he had not considered and wasn't considering trading John Gibson. And Gibson has said, I don't want to go anywhere. He likes it out there and everything else. However, Rosen laid it out, and I thought he laid it out in such a way that he's probably right on the money. And he just said, look, this summer, at this point, it'll be time for the Ducks to look at this. And I'm sure Verbeek will, because he's very thorough. He's comes from the Steve Eisenman school of managership. I'm sure he will look at it this way. He's 29 now. He's got 4 years left. They're not going to be a factor within the realm of his contract or at the very end of it. He'll be 32 or 33. So right now he could fetch a real handsome return. And there happens to be two teams who would be desperate for Gibson. And, that would be Buffalo and Pittsburgh. Yeah, and I think there would be almost a bidding war for him over that. So, it doesn't have to be this season that they trade him, and he's got to agree to it. He has a 10-team no trade list that he would have to submit. But I doubt Buffalo, which is close to Pennsylvania where he grew up, and Pittsburgh where he did grow up, neither would be on his list of teams I don't want to go to.
Yeah, that would be the question, though, and Mike and Joe could answer this. I think, and especially if he went in the deal, with all the fanfare with Devin Levi, if all of a sudden Gibson comes, he's being blocked, or Levi's in the deal, I think fans would actually be upset initially at that. Yeah. Maybe they would like Gibson over time, but they've kind of really looked at Levi like, hey, he's our next guy, and now you might be making him either irrelevant or you're trading him.
Joe, I can guarantee you Levi won't be in that deal. Yeah. He would not be.
And I don't think the Ducks would insist on it. Don't they have a young guy, Russ?
Dostal's really close. He's close.
Yeah, I think they're okay in goal. I think they would have their sights set on one of the scorers. The young scorer. Now that's just a gut feeling. But
Levi then.
Yeah. So
I mean, you kind of are, but I don't know. I have to keep going back to the comparisons that a guy in Levi's position coming out of college, right. You'll have finite number of games playing in college. Mm-hmm. But it's Hellebuck, it's what
Spencer Knight is
Spencer Knight's another one, Demko, and then even going back to Miller, because Levi put up the numbers that Miller did.
Right.
Go back to Miller, and granted the lockout year kind of throws that up in the air, but Miller played basically 2 full seasons in
Right.
the AHL.
Exactly.
Outside of the lockout season before he became a Sabre. Now maybe that lockout season he goes to Buffalo right away. We don't know. It doesn't matter. But history's history. But Levi's played 60 whatever college games.
Yeah.
We're gonna find out how he looks against pros when he once he gets some practices in him. I would bet anything he plays on the 27th against Montreal. That's the date I've had circled forever. But I want to see what he looks like against pros. I want to see how that goes. I mean, it's the only way to have a real good idea about it.
No, but he should go to the AHL for a year. There's still going to be like 4 more years on Gibson's contract.
I mean, don't you think he's got him 2 years, Russ? I mean,
maybe 2, but even then, you still got
but then Gibson's still an asset, and if it's time, you move him on.
Yeah,
you get
it's a great guy for Levi.
I mean, first of all, we know that Levi is going to play a game to burn the first year of his ELC.
Yeah. Already burned because he signed. It's already done.
Yeah. But Joe, I mean, from what I understand from all the reporting, the plan is he's not going to go after the season. He's going to stick with the Sabres the rest of the year, and then he's not going to go to Rochester at all.
Nope.
Oh, so there's an opportunity now. Maybe they don't want to put a kid fresh out of college in the Calder Cup playoff situation. But next year, I mean, if they go out and they trade for Gibson or trade for Demko or trade for a big goaltender, and Luukkonen doesn't go in that deal, Anderson probably retires. Eric Comrie is probably in Rochester because, or who knows what they'll do.
Right.
Levi, I think it makes complete sense for Levi to play often in the AHL and get work, and at the absolute worst or at the absolute best, he does a Carter Hart and maybe comes up in January or February. But honestly, a full year in the AHL does not hurt him. I think all it does is
it won't hurt him, but it's still, you are putting a blockade in front of him.
There's immense pressure. I mean, Levi's got circled after last season when he puts up a 952 in Northeastern. That's get everybody here's like, sign him now, get him in here now, let's go. And it's like, guys, pump the brakes. You got it's different with goalies than it is with every other position because there's a process to it.
Yeah, there is.
It's almost silly to say on one hand, well, you don't want to throw him right into the AHL playoffs, and then on the other hand say, and maybe he'll be ready by January to play in the NHL. Like, I mean, there's some silliness to that.
Yeah, Kev, if it was me, I would say you're playing in Rochester the entire year and talk to us.
Yeah,
spring.
That's what I would do too,
for sure. And I don't know that he's the same level of prospect, but Steve Yzerman has already told Kosa, like, he started him out in the East Coast Hockey League.
Right.
He's played a whole year there, and he's gotten better and better. And then next year he'll go to Grand Rapids, and I think they've already told him, and you ain't coming up next year either. And then the third year of pro, then we'll see where you're at. I think that process was what it was going to be with Luukkonen, but goalie injuries in Buffalo, COVID, all that stuff kind of threw it aside. He got injuries, it's a battle with that too. I mean, there's so many things that can just get in the way of developing a goalie. And I just think with Levi, I've talked about this with Lance on maintenance day. We've talked about goalies ad nauseum all, for a year and a half now. But with Levi, I think they're going to give him the opportunity to win a job in Buffalo next season. Yeah, it's going to be there. It's going to be up to him to show it in camp and go from there. And if he shows he's ready and he can handle all of it, he'll be there. I don't know if he'll be the number one, but he'll be there. But I don't think you would feel bad about having him, maybe split starts with Luukkonen or Comrie or whatever. They're not going to do a 3-headed goalie thing again. One of those guys will end up somewhere else.
Yeah, for sure.
If Levi ascends to that role,
it's a shame.
It'll be goalie.
But
yeah. Honestly, Anderson might be an assistant coach at this point.
A guy like Ottinger, who was a first-round pick, who was a Team USA goaltender at the World Junior, he played parts of 2 seasons with Texas in the AHL,
and he won a championship there.
Yep.
Right. So I mean, that development path, and even his partner in the 2018 World Junior, Joe Wall, who got hurt a bunch of times. He's having a fantastic year in the AHL. He's finally playing regularly. At 24 years old, he's only now being fully formed. I mean, what I'm saying with Levi is like he has the ability of being a great goaltender if you don't rush him. And this is the same playbook that I argued against with Philadelphia, and what apparently Ron Hextall argued against with Philadelphia, and the reason he got fired was rushing Carter Hart. I think Carter Hart's a good goaltender. You don't know what the hell kind of goaltender he would have been had he stayed in the AHL for the full year and developed properly.
Yeah,
I just don't think I don't think Buffalo's going to rush him. They haven't rushed anybody.
Yeah.
I mean, if they were rushing people, Yuri Kulik would already be in Buffalo. Jack Quinn would have been. Quinn and Peterka would have been up here last season. Halfway through the year. So I
they got a little desperate with the goaltending, like you pointed out yourself.
Yeah. I mean, that's a self-made problem. They didn't address goaltending at all the last. I mean, they did sort of with.
You're already telling me if they don't get Gibson, they're going to give Levi a chance to win the job next year. He shouldn't really have that.
I'm saying they're going to win. They're going to give him a chance to win a spot on the team.
A spot,
not the number one job.
Okay, team.
Yeah. See,
that's not a great plan.
No, that isn't a great plan.
But
you don't want a 21-year-old playing 20 games as a backup with the Sabres. You want to play 60 games in Rochester.
I think if he winds up in Buffalo somehow, and I think he would have to be beyond lights out to win it. Let me be straight on that. Putting up a 9-10 in the preseason, that ain't gonna do it.
Right.
But if he does make it, that changes. I think that completely changes how you handle it, because then it's a 1A 1B kind of thing, because you need him to play games. You can't have him play 25 games and say, all right, we're good. Whoever you're bringing in to play the other 55 games, 57 games, it's got to be a number one. So then you're trading for one at that point.
I think that's going to be hard on him too, to be told that he's got a chance to win a job. Like, I think you're better off to say, no matter how great you are, you're going to the AHL and you're going to play a full season, and you can relax. It's too much pressure on a kid like that. Even a guy, Spencer Knight, has not been everything that everyone hoped he would be, and he felt a little rushed.
I think he did feel a little rushed. Yeah.
Darren Pupa played 3 full seasons.
Bad too,
right, Joe? Even Darren Pupa played 3 full seasons in the AHL, and I watched him play in college. You did too.
I'd say he played 4 years in college, I believe. At RPI.
At RPI, had a bunch of injuries to goalies, and they had
he went to 2 for RPI.
Yeah. Only 2? Okay.
Yeah, but he stayed in the AHL. He did stay. He
did win a national championship, though, Russ.
Yeah.
1985.
I think it's ironic, and I was talking to somebody today about this. Did you hear, Kevin, at all that if the Sabres had talked to Columbus about the Korpisalo Gavrikov trade, because that actually is exactly what they needed, right? When you look at it,
that is what they needed.
Look at a trade like that's like the player. I couldn't get anybody.
Yeah.
Else they did.
I don't know what did they end up giving up for, getting for those two.
Well, I mean, Quick went back the other way, but I think it was a 1 or a 2. I'm pretty sure.
I think it was a 1. I'm pretty sure it was a 1, but they would have to give up a 1, which they're not going to obviously do right now. But
I don't think they were going to give up a 1.
That's interesting. That's exactly the kind of players they need the most. Looking at a poll that just came out on the least understood sports and hockey in America. Okay, it's kind of an interesting one. On how people admit whether or not they understand it or kind of understand it, the rules are confusing. Where do you think the NHL came up on this one?
It was a 1 and a 3 in the deal.
1 and 3, okay.
Right.
So where do you think the NHL came up on this list of 10? There are 10 sports on here. So you have obscure sports like volleyball, golf.
Who made this list?
Who made the list?
Okay, so the list.
No, who made it? Who made the list?
Who made the list? I'm sorry. I'm telling you. The list is from a website, YouGov. Okay. And the survey shows the correlation between popularity and rules understanding across all sports. There's no way that football and baseball are easier to understand than hockey, at least based on the rules. Do you think that's true or not? I don't know if that's necessarily true. Football and baseball are harder to understand or easier to understand?
No, they're easier.
They're easier.
Right.
People still don't. My wife still doesn't understand icing.
So they asked very well.
It's a big tripping line for everybody.
Yeah.
Offsides is tough.
People were asked, you did very well, somewhat well, not sure, not very well, not at all.
So I think hockey's going to be 8th worst.
Right.
I'd say 7th. Yeah.
The categories, the sports are football, baseball, basketball, tennis, soccer, volleyball, boxing, golf, hockey, and rugby.
So
I'd
rugby's
say
gonna be
rugby's
the first.
last. Yeah.
Rugby last. Okay, that is correct, Kevin. Rugby is last.
Yeah, I knew that. So they're gonna be second to last. Ninth.
Yeah.
You're right.
I'll say 7.
You're right. They're second to last.
Yeah.
They're behind golf, boxing, volleyball, soccer, tennis, basketball, baseball, and football.
Yeah, I mean, because a lot of those sports, like, people have played.
I think that's great.
Yeah, and so that makes it. People play tennis. You play it in PE when you're in high school and middle school. So you play soccer when you're a kid. You run right. So you sort of got a basic idea. But at least nationwide, not a large percentage of people play hockey. So
golf rules are ridiculously easy, really.
Yeah.
No, I had the advantage of being a professional street hockey and floor hockey player from my youth. So
yes,
I know.
I would say baseball is probably like 5th.
Yeah, they were. I mean, I'll tell you the list. It's really interesting. So
because they have so many rules.
They do have a lot of rules, And sorry, I lost for a second, but I'll be right back to it. But yeah, I think that it's pretty. I think it's pretty fascinating because I know, to me, one of the best things about making hockey easier to understand was not having to explain to people the 2-line pass. Like when I was when I used to kick girls on dates, to hockey games, which I would always do, which was maybe the best move, but I did take them to dates at the hockey games. The one question that always come up is 2-line pass. I remember one time my date saying, well, "What if they pass it from over the blue line, their blue line, to over the goal line? Is that a 2-line pass?" And I'm like, "No." But that crossed 2 lines, and so it was very 2-line pass was always a tough one, But I think that of all the rules, that was one that got me. When that they got rid of that, was there a battle at all about that, Kevin? When they got rid of the 2-line pass?
Well, no, because they were just so open to the rule reformation,
right?
So like it's everyone woke up and said, let's do something really drastic, right. And they did, and it was good. When you think back about it,
it was just one of those rules. It's like, why didn't they get rid of that long before that?
Well, NHL has always been fearful of change. I've said this before, but you look in my lifetime how the other sports have been altered like incredibly by major rule changes. I remember the fight when they went to the 3-point shot in basketball, and people just were outraged over this. And now, you can't even imagine basketball. Lowering the mound in 69 season. That was a big thing. I
don't think the Dodgers have lowered the mound, but anyhow.
The DH, those kinds of things. Those are major rule changes, and we're essentially playing the same game, other than now we've taken out the 2-line pass. But
I do think that the change in the offside rule, Joe. I mean,
I was just thinking of that too.
Breaking the plane, thank God, because I think it's a lot easier now than it was.
Yeah, what was it? It was no tag up offside.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah,
like that. The tag up offsides, I remember before that existed, right? When we all remember that. Well, we probably don't know if you remember that.
Delayed offside, tag up offside.
Before there was a delayed offside concept, when it was just offside.
I forget how it worked. I know it was on some of the old video games. It's not that long ago. It's on the 90s games, and I'm like, geez, I struggle to remember what it was like, because the way it is now is the only way it ever made sense to me.
Yes.
The old way made zero sense.
Yeah.
It's still just fine tuning the rules. We haven't had, the other rule changes, like football is a completely different game,
Right. Yeah.
2-hand touch for the quarterback, the goalposts are back.
Basketball's the same way too. When they got rid of hand checking, like that changed.
It's a lot different.
Changes have come against the goalies because the league hates goalies.
They want scoring, and obviously the trapezoid behind the net is the dumbest rule.
Now that Marty Brodeur has retired, let's go back and let the goalies have free reign.
Trapezoid. Let's they would make the stick shorter. If they could, they'd make the it's like.
Right, exactly.
My favorite thing about the goalie hate is that it all happened because they let the Devils get away with interfering with everything in the 90s.
Yes.
And then everybody copied it. And they're like, well, we got to do something about this.
Well,
the goalies are all
that's what made Marty Brodeur so good, is the defenseman could hold up guys. So you dump it in, Marty would have time to get the puck and put it out because the defensemen were putting sticks on guys when they were coming in.
Let me make one
They
suggestion.
just never called interference ever, and it was like, what are we doing here?
One suggestion for the NHL: you have one guy that checks all the goalie equipment. Maybe get a second guy and let one guy do the East and one do the West.
Yeah, that reminds me of one of my favorite moments ever with Scotty Bowman. And if you didn't know Scotty, you would think he was pulling your leg. But I was doing a story on the neutral zone trap, and I went to talk to him. And he said to me, he said, Kevin, you know this, the trap is an offensive system. I said, what are you talking about? He goes, yeah. He says, they were doing it in the 50s. But it's designed, he said, to create turnovers.
Yeah, it's a counterattack.
So for a counterattack, it's a counterattack system. So I don't even accept your premise that it's a defensive system. He said,
that's
he ran the left wing lock.
It sounds like it is like left wing lock. It sounds like it's cutting it down, but the reality is like the Penguins basically played a version of that too. When they were winning their Stanley Cups most recently, and
the Devils played a decade of it.
The Devils played more of a trap, but that still was about countering. It was about frustrating other teams to the point where they got so frustrated they made mistakes, and then you counterattack them.
Yeah, and then you're immediately on the attack. I mean, that's what Scotty said. He said, if you do that successfully, it creates offense.
Yeah, it does all the time. And if you've got great guys, and if you got like the talent of
so
like
Scotty ruined the article for you?
See, well, no, he didn't actually, because obviously I had a different angle than most people. But there was another favorite. It was an interview that I will never forget. Ron Wilson. I tried to talk to him about the neutral zone trap. He goes, I'll talk to you. He goes, you guys always want to talk about trap. He says, I only talk to you if you can diagram the neutral zone trap for me. And he handed me the coach's thing, and I got a pencil and I drew it up what I thought was the trap. He goes, that's fairly close. All right, I'll talk about it.
Ron Wilson was always surly. He was always surly.
Yeah.
He was especially surly after he tampered with the Sedins on Toronto radio.
Was fired on Christmas Day. Remember that?
By his best friend.
No, he got extended on Christmas Day, didn't he?
No, he was extended on Christmas Day.
Yeah. He was fired on Christmas Day.
Yeah, no, he was
extended.
Because Burke was playing stuff with the Toronto media, so they had to work on Christmas Day.
All right, so tonight, two big games, only two games. Go from like 18 to last night, whatever, to 2 tonight. Edmonton, Arizona. Edmonton wins. Edmonton beats Arizona.
Arizona. Never mind.
But the Buzztron is not, even though it is a non-thinking, feeling thing. So therefore, it doesn't matter that it went 4-8 last night. It is going out on a limb tonight and saying Pittsburgh is going to win in Colorado.
Wow!
All right, this is a major game for the Pittsburgh Penguins in many ways when you think about it.
Makar may not play, but still,
who might not play?
Makar.
Right, but
Buzztron doesn't know that.
No, it has an injury. Has an injury thing for guys when guys go on IR. There's a factor. There's something.
Buzztron knows crap.
Buzztron knows when a guy's on IR. But yeah, this is a game like the Penguins have been struggling. They've been falling back, but this is the kind of game. Crosby against McKinnon. You can see this. You can see the Penguins winning tonight.
They can stop the puck.
I know, I agree. But it doesn't but this is one of those hockey logical things.
The problem. The Buzztron uses punch cards, which I learned about in high school.
But also, Cale Makar's not playing tonight.
That's big, right?
No, wake up. We said that.
The Buzztron uses.
I've been fighting on my internet, dude. Give me a break.
I took give anybody a break.
I took one computer chip out of a TI-35, another out of an old Speak and Spell. The Buzztron's built out of those two chips. Okay, so it's working pretty well. It's coming along. You got to change the 9-volt battery every 2 days. But besides that, it's working good. But yeah. And guys, did you ever notice that, if you ever need an extra AAA battery, do you know the concept that if you take a 9-volt apart, there's 2 AAA batteries inside of it?
I've never heard that.
It's honestly the case. Like if you go, if you take the top, what a 9-volt battery looks like, obviously, right? If you take the top and the bottom off a 9-volt battery, there's 2 AAAs in there.
But I have to have a top put
it's
back.
Shorter,
you can use them. You can use
shorter than It's shorter than the AAA battery.
No, same thing. It's the same size. There's 2 AAA batteries inside a 9-volt battery.
I'm going to do it when I get it from the dollar store, not the $5 one.
Yeah,
if I Rayovac 9 volts,
Right. If I cut up a 9-volt battery and it's not 2 AAA batteries, you owe me $9.
You got it. I'm gladly. If that's the case, Mike, you can never again say it's over for the Islanders this year. That's my bet for you.
Wow.
All right.
Actual stakes. I like it.
According to you asked me to check, I just did on Puck Money or Money Puck, whichever it is, .com.
Yeah.
And they've got the Islanders now as an 80% probability to make the playoffs. And the Florida, based on last night's loss, has fallen down to 73. And the Penguins now are at 42.
So it has those two making it. Florida Penguins not making it.
Yeah, that's correct.
So, because it's always weird when there's three of them, when those three teams were above 50%, which they were the other day. But the reality is, I mean, Florida's got Toronto 3 times.
Dan B says you were wrong about it. He's got the voltage figured
No,
out.
I've done it. You're wrong, Dan. I've done it. I'm serious. I've done it 100%. I guarantee you that's the case. You can't make. It's hard to make a 9-volt battery out of 2 AAAs though, because you
need to do it live on air and then show us how it powers the next device.
All right, I'll do that. Look forward to that tomorrow on the show.
Okay.
I'll be taking apart a 9-volt battery in front of you, putting it into my game of Blip that I have here, my Blip game, ladies, and we'll play that.
But are you gonna lick it to test it?
Yeah, no. Our base, because most guitar cables, guitar boxes, and stuff like that are used 9-volt batteries to.
He can't lick it and put the light bulb in his mouth like Uncle.
No, but Captain EO, who you guys all know well, was notorious for if anybody on the stage had a 9-volt, they weren't sure if they were ready to throw it to Captain. They throw it to Eric. Eric, lick this, and Eric would think, that's good, and give it back to him.
I'm not shocked at that.
That was a typical sound check for us. Remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey, and it's even that with the buzz. And we'll be back again tomorrow, and we'll talk to you then. Have a good